Hey everyone, once again here with another interview video here with Josh with Zutao's Hime, and we're going to be discussing some more about his game here. If you guys missed it, we've actually done two videos already talking to him. The first video and second video, I'll have them both linked in the description below, where the first video we sort of talk about the game. You guys can get familiar with what's going on with it and all that. The second game, we go over sort of their plans for the future and also future events, like they'll be at the Origins TV displaying the game on, I believe you said it was going to be Sunday of that event, which is June 21st, which sounds pretty cool and all that. So today I thought I'd do something which a lot of people are actually, I've noticed are through comments and stuff are interested in, which is sort of what goes into creating a game, which you've alluded to several different times. Some of your process for the art and with the beads and all that. So I thought we'd get into that a little bit more, but just in case, once again, I'd highly recommend going and watching those two videos first. But in case they haven't, if you want to sort of introduce who you are and what Zutao's Hime is.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Josh Bakken. I'm the designer for a strategic tile placement game called Zutao's Hime. And Zutao's Hime is basically, like I've said in the other videos, but I'll just say it again, it's kind of like what would happen if you took your favorite TCG and kind of married it with dominoes, if you will, and kind of the baby they had would be a strategic tile placement game. So definitely check it out, and yeah, any support you can give, that would be great.
Yeah, so and as always, in the description below, I'll also have a link for the game right now. Once the game is officially released, it's only, or this is starter set 1. Once that's officially out, it's only $30, which gives you 80 tiles or 2 decks. But right now, if you pre-order it, it's only $24 for the same 80 tiles and 2 decks, which I thought was super awesome. So I definitely highly recommend going and pre-ordering that before the pre-order process ends, and then it's back to normal price there.
Yeah, one thing I didn't mention before in the other videos was that we also are doing a limited print run. So
Oh, right.
for people who are interested in that type of thing, it's going to say first printing, first edition on the boxes, and I'm kind of a collector myself, so the future iterations will have a different printing number. So it'll be like, first edition, second printing. So this first printing, for people who care about that type of stuff, is only limited to 5,000 units. So we're going to print next month. We're only printing 5,000. So if you, again, care about that type of stuff, please pre-order before, because we're going to be cutting the pre-orders off when we get close to that number, and then we're going to start the second printing right after that. So, but if it doesn't matter to you, if you don't care about first printing, second printing, you can get it whenever. But if you do want that very early printing, I would recommend jumping on that pre-order as soon as possible.
Yeah, and I thought that was super cool also that you have a quantity limit for it as well, because there's been other games that do that whole first print and everything, but they print like a normal amount, so there's never a need for like a second edition or second print of it, so it sort of loses that sort of cool collector factor. So I like that it's sort of that it's got that cap on it, so you actually feel like you're getting in on something special there.
Yep.
So first, so we had talked about your art, how it came from the classic to anime, and then also sort of how you got your first inspiration to switch to the tiles and everything. So as a are you, well, I guess my first question, are you the sole designer of all the cards and stuff, or
Yes, I am. Yep,
oh
I'm
wow.
sole designer. My brothers play tested some good stuff. Play tested it with me and had some good feedback. But basically, I can say that if every word written, for the most part, no, pretty much every word written on every tile, all the mechanics for each tile, you can either praise or blame me. So if you're playing the game and you're like, "What is this broken piece of blank?" Yeah, just hit me up and say, "Josh, you really messed up on this one. Like, this is way too OP. How can you even like think about this?" I get a lot of that from my friends who are helping, play test the game too. There's a Rooster is I don't want to go into each creature too much, but Rooster, as you might imagine, is very weak and very dumb. but in order to create balance between that, it has some crazy powerful action tiles. So one of those is where it can actually cause an opponent to lose a turn. And one of my TCG friends like was looking at it, he's like, Josh, this is just broken. You cannot have this thing be in the game. And it's in the game, but it's modified a little bit. But yeah, like I said, if you got any problems with the balance or the wording or anything like that, yeah, I'm the person to blame. But one thing I haven't mentioned in the other videos is these two pre-constructed decks that you're getting in the first starter set. These are battle-tested decks for fun. So what I basically done is for years and lots of conventions, I would take these decks and I would have random people play me, have random people play each other, and the balance just on these two decks alone has just proven to be really, really good. So you don't have it's pretty much a 50-50 win ratio. So not one is overpowering the other. So you should feel pretty confident that when you crack open this starter set, you're going to have two balanced decks that have been battle tested over many, many conventions from lots of different people, from people who are near pro, past pro, TCG players, to just people who don't even know what a stack mechanism is or anything like that. Like lots of people play these, and I feel pretty confident about this as a product to put out there.
Awesome. So as this will be a little bit easier since you're the sole game designer. So how did you go about making the sort of a balanced game? Because that's probably the hardest part. Is like you said, you it sounds like you did a lot of play testing, but is there a process outside of just sort of play testing, redesign, play test?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and one thing I didn't mention before was kind of like the origins. Like I mentioned how I got to tiles, but I didn't mention how I got to focusing on the Chinese zodiac. So, and the little story behind that is I was having a conversation with someone, and they just randomly asked me, "Hey, what's your Chinese zodiac, creature?" And I didn't have any. I didn't know what they were talking about. Like I had no clue. I don't even think I had the whole childhood memory of going to a Chinese restaurant and seeing those animals. I don't even think I knew that mythology. So I was like, "What is that?" And they're like, "Oh, what's your birth year? I'll tell you." So I told her my birth year, and she's like, "Oh, it's a pig." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, that's cool. That's a pig, blah, 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 cool." And then they were like, "But what kind of pig?" And I was like, "What are you talking about? What kind of pig?" And then apparently we looked at it based on my birth date or something, and they were like, "Oh, you're a metal pig." And I was like, "Metal pig?" I'm like, "What is that all about?" And they were like, "Oh yeah, there's the animals and they have different elements." So it was like fire monkey, metal pig, and I was like, "What? Now this is actually starting to sound cool." And then I was thinking to myself, water monkey and fire pig, and I was just like, whoa, that's got game just written all over it. Because I mentioned previously that I have kind of been playing TCGs for kind of a while from the kind of beginning, and it just nothing rang to me. Nothing. I never remembered anybody tapping into that. They tapped into everything else practically, right? But that was one thing that I was just trying to jog my memory banks. Has anybody done anything? And it turns out they hadn't. I went and checked online. No one's done anything. Not even board games or anything. So I was just I was flummoxed. I was like, what is going on here? So that's kind of the reason why I ran with the theme. And then once I decided to go with that theme, it was kind of, I don't want to say it was easy, but the beauty, and please feel free to cut me off, because once I start talking about this, I tend to ramble. But I'm just going to start. The beauty of working with the Chinese zodiac is that it's creatures that no matter where you go in the world, everybody knows about them, right? So, for instance, if you're trying to teach someone a new TCG game, for instance, and this new TCG game has a complete new set of lore and words and creatures that nobody's ever heard of, a huge barrier to enjoying that game is getting somebody to buy in long enough to care enough about the lore, right? But if you go to someone and go, "Hey, bunnies," and bunnies and pigs doing stuff, everybody knows that. There's no barrier there. So once I jumped into that, it was like, okay, well, what do bunnies do. Oh, bunnies are cute, they're fuzzy, they do, they hop. So, you know, basically what I was able to do, except for dragons, because dragons don't exist, but we know kind of what dragons are supposed to do, right? Dragons are supposed to fly, they're supposed to breathe fire, they're supposed to really like gold, and so, but aside from dragons, I just did that with every creature type, basically. So what do rams do? Rams smack their heads, against things. And so what does that lend itself to? Well, it lends itself to pushing things, right? So there's some ram action tiles that allow a ram, if it's like, tile, you play an action, the ram will push the tile over, and what do oxen do? Oxen, instead of push, they pull, right? So a ram will have one that pushes the tile somewhere. An ox will have a tile action that allows it to pull it somewhere. Rabbits can hop over tiles. Dragons can fly. Pigs can waddle. And then what can snakes do? Snakes can constrict, right? So like one of the snake tiles is called constrict, and what it does is it's a hand attacking. It attacks the hand. So like, if I play constrict on someone, you basically squeeze them so they drop some of their tiles. So that's a way to like remove some of the tiles out of your opponent's hand. Another one for ram is called oof, where the ram hits this, figuratively hits somebody with their horns and they drop some of their tiles out of their hand. So just tapping into what creatures do naturally was a way to kind of spur a lot of the actions and reactions. And then the question came, well, how powerful do you make those things, right? You can have them be like when a ram hits figuratively hits an opponent, makes them drop tiles. How many do they drop? Do they drop their whole hand? Do they drop half of their hand? Is that rounded up? Is that rounded down? Is there any other thing that needs to happen for that to happen? Like, do you need to remove a ram from the playing area? So those are the types of things that after I had the basic move down, I had to kind of whittle it down and kind of massage it into how difficult it is to do these moves and how powerful they were. Like, for instance, earlier I mentioned that roosters are kind of dumb and not very strong, as you would imagine in nature. So that's kind of like a thing that isn't hard to explain why a rooster isn't strong, right? And why it's not particularly smart. But it has some amazing abilities. But I had to do that to offset the fact that it was a dumb and weak creature. Whereas opposed to like a tiger that's very strong, and moderately intelligent, it might the strength of the creature means that it might have less powerful action tiles. So, and then also there's compatibility aspect too. Like some of the weak creatures have more compatibility with other creatures, kind of make them more useful. And some of the creatures that have more compatibilities, what I just said, just the opposite of that, might work to offset some of the weaknesses of some of the creatures. So you kind of imagine like different games have like maybe 5 different colors or 6 different power sources. Imagine working with 12 of those, because that's basically what it is that you're able to do is work with 12 different archetypes of power, if you will, and then kind of tapping into that, and then making sure that none of those, if somebody wants to play a solo dragon deck, is that viable, and how would that play against a solo monkey deck? Like, you kind of have to balance that and make sure that monkey is tricky enough to maybe get away from a dragon fire blast or something like that. So yeah, there was a lot of things that went into it to kind of balance it and to come up with new and different tiles for the creatures.
Yeah, and I really like, or you explained that was pretty cool, because one thing I really love that card games sometimes do and don't do is actually doing flavor in the sense of like actions that the card does or doesn't do based on what the card is. Like one thing I like as an example, like that Forcible did a while back, was it had a card that was Thor and it had an attachment that was his hammer. and if the hammer went to the graveyard, Thor had an effect that it would go from the graveyard back onto him. In which I was like, oh, that's the coolest scene ever. So here you'd be like, oh, the bunny jumps over stuff, and the ram will like push stuff and knocks pull stuff and stuff like that. Is like, not everyone will care about that, but that sort of like attention to detail I find really fun and cool for a game, because it adds more character to the game and cards, rather than just like, hey, here's the pig, it deals 3 damage to this, and it's like, well, I guess
like I can safely say that every single tile that's attached to a creature is attached to a creature in a recognizable reason for it being attached to that creature. Like you mentioned, pig has a tile called omnivorous, and basically what that tile does is it lets it eat another tile next to it. Now, why does it allow it's basically tile removal, but it's done in a flavor that everybody knows what a pig does, right? A pig eats. It eats like a lot of stuff, right? So
yeah.
So that's like a really fun tile. And there's another tile. Actually, I don't want to spoil all the tiles, but there's other tiles that are, particularly there's one in horse that's actually really, really cool and gets a lot of smiles and laughs out of. But I'll let that be for people who buy the pack and open it up, and they'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So yeah, I tried very hard to make things make sense in terms of animals' abilities versus what they can do in the game, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. If you guys want to see more of that, go ahead and pre-order in the link below. But this is your first game, obviously, and you said you created the company behind it to help distribute the game. Was there anything sort of challenging about that? Like, what was like some sort of like something you had to go through in order to get to the point you're at now, where you're actually releasing the game to the public?
Yeah, I mean, tons of times. Here, I'll just show you. For instance, this is double-sided. This is the Articles of Incorporation for Zeus Studios, and this has nothing to do with game design or anything. It just has to do with reading 50 pages of let's start a company legal stuff. So the hardest thing is probably taking your brain and removing it from the thing that you love to do the things that you have to do in order to kind of make this thing a reality, right? So this morning, actually, I just signed an agreement with a distributor, and I'm very happy that went through, and I'm super excited about that. But reading that, making sure that makes sense, it just puts you in a different headspace than talking about bunnies hopping over monkeys and monkeys throwing bananas and stuff. So it's different, and I'd much rather live in the zoo the zoo tiles world, but it's kind of like one of those things you just have to do in order to make that reality. You have to do some of the outside stuff as well. So yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah, I was say everything from designing each individual card to working with distributors is quite a bit to be doing there.
Yeah.
Is there plans for you to maybe I guess, or I should rephrase that. Is it just you and TR right now, or is there other people in the company?
No, actually, we have a really good crew. It's not just him and I. So we have myself, who's basically the mechanics designer, TR, which is handling the art direction and marketing stuff for the Hime stuff, and then we have I might have mentioned him earlier in maybe the first video. We have the artist 53C, who is the artist on all of the Hime stuff, and then we have a graphic designer, TJ Freyas, who is responsible for all the cool stuff, like all the iconography and the design of the tiles. That's all his work. So it's definitely not just me and TR. And we have other people helping us too. We got a bunch of playtesters who are still to this day, making decks, trying to break it, all that kind of good stuff before we go to print. So I wish I could say I was good enough to do all that myself, but no, I definitely have help in doing all that, for sure.
That's awesome. So like you said, you've been working on this in some capacity, like you said, since 2003 and stuff like that. Over this amount of time, do you have any advice for other people who are trying to maybe design their game or trying to get in the space? Because you've gone, like I just mentioned a second ago, you've gone from conception to by yourself designing the game, and then now you're to the point of distributing and going to conventions, marketing stuff. Do you have any advice for people that, especially that maybe you wish you had at the start of this?
I do, and I think the best thing that's helped me, and the best piece of advice that I can give someone, is to get your game out to people and try your best to remove yourself from their reaction to it. And so even if that is giving it to a friend to take to a convention for you, and then them come back and report the reactions of people, what you don't want to do is you don't want to take your game, because it's such a personal, it's such a internal and a personal thing. You know, you're wrapping your there's a lot that goes into making a game, and the reasons why people even want to make a game, right? You want to share something with the world, and so it's your baby. It's more than your baby, you know. There's ego wrapped up into it, and so what I've seen is I've gone to a lot of different protospiels, and I'll give you an example of how not to be. So I was at one, I think it was at KublaCon. It was either it might have been last year. Is it KublaCon last year? And they have in the Bay Area. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and this area is great for up and coming designers. So every convention has like a protospiel area, like a demo your own creation kind of space. And so I went to one, and there was a kid there, and he was a kid. He was probably, I want to say 12, 13 or so, and his parents were there, and he was showing off a game that he made, and you know, bless his heart, he's trying, and it's great, and I want to encourage everybody to do that. But one thing, I was playing a four-player version of his game with me, and then him and two of his friends who had already played the game, so they already kind of know how to play the game, but I'm coming at this new. I've never played it before. And some of the mechanics that he had going on were just broken. Like some of the tiles, or not tiles, some of the cards were just broken. I could see what he was doing, but it just wasn't working. And so I tried to explain to him, I'm like, hey, you know what, you know, this isn't quite working, and you might want to think about this. And he wasn't having it. He was going to explain to me why, you know, well, no, you see, you wait until you get this other card, and then when you put these two cards together, you know, this amazing magic will happen, you know. And I didn't want to argue with him, but there's just a lot of problems with that, and that, like, well, what if I never get that card, or just, you know, there's a lot of kind of things where the deck I was given was not playable, basically. And so what you don't want to do is you don't want to argue with the people that are giving you feedback, even though it's something really personal to you. And so what I try to do is I just try to teach the game, and then be very, very open to feedback for the game. And I've had great feedback. Like one of the pieces that made me change the game was that there were situations where you would draw your tiles, and you have a hand of tiles, and then let's say you're playing with a 3-creature deck. Let's say you were playing with ram, pig, and rabbit. So you had different tiles. But if you had only a ram out, but your hand was full of rabbit tiles, you know, you couldn't really do anything. And people were reporting that they were feeling stuck. And so what I had to do was come up with a way to be like, okay, I recognize that. I'm going to say that during your turn, as one of your actions, you can discard 2 tiles to draw a new one. And since I've implemented that, I have not heard of that complaint at all. But the reason why I was able to make that change was because I was open to the criticism and of what people were feeling. They were feeling stuck, so I had to fix that. I didn't argue with them and go, oh, you know what, you gotta wait, like, just tough it out. You don't want to tell people that they gotta tough out anything in your game. You know, you need to constantly work on that. So have the openness for criticism, and really think hard about how the person's feeling when they're you know, maybe stuck or something like that. And if you find yourself, you know, having to explain or having to argue or go tit for tat with someone, then I would recommend giving that to someone you trust and having them take it to a convention and then report back, what the deal is with people interacting with your game. You don't want to, basically the cliff notes, the too long didn't read, is that you don't want to fool yourself into thinking that your game is better than it really is, basically, and try to figure out ways to come to that conclusion. That would be my best advice.
Yeah, and the thing about it is, if you're not listening to people's advice and stuff like that, you're holding yourself back from what could potentially be a better version of what you already had, like on a more minuscule scale. Like when I did the my video, I had a weekly video series, TCG News, and when it started, it was just me like this on my webcam and talking about stuff, and I'd sometimes have image pop up, and then I got feedback, and I'd be like, oh, no, you guys are dumb, you don't understand how much work goes into this. But then I was finally like, oh, okay, I guess I'll start doing this, or I'll start doing a green screen, and the green screen wasn't super great, and the lighting wasn't great, but I was like, this is the best I can do, and got complaints about that, and I would get mad at him, but eventually, once I started accepting him, it got to the point where it was near the end of it, where I have the much nicer green screen lighting, and when I would make the videos, I'd be like, oh, I would actually feel a lot better about them, because it's like, oh, this looks really nice and crisp and pretty, and majority of those improvements were from comments of people saying, hey, you should do this or something, and stuff that I would normally brush off, but eventually would sink in, and because of that, it just created a genuinely better thing at the end. So but it is hard to sometimes take that criticism, especially like you said, if you're there. But I like the idea you said of having a third party pretty much go to the conventions and report back to you is a really smart idea for something like that.
Yeah, and it's not that you have to listen to every piece of criticism. Yeah. So, for instance, I'll give you a perfect example of criticism you don't want to listen to. My brother, when I was first doing it, he was like, "Oh, this game is trash. You have to start over from scratch. Like, it's horrible. Blah 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 blah." No, it's the same game it's more or less the same game that everyone's enjoying now. So you just gotta I guess it's tough. You gotta figure out what criticisms to keep and what criticisms to just kind of
which are actually helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Any last things you want to leave people with here?
No, I mean, I just want to say that, going out the gate as a small publisher. Oh, well, one thing, just as an aside, this is the first game that I've designed, but I've been a part of the game industry for quite a number of years. Probably there are people who may be familiar. I worked for EA for a while. I worked for Hasbro Interactive. There's a company called Area Games that I was producer on a couple of games there. And then more recently, last year, I was executive producer on a few mobile games. So this isn't just, I'm just giving that as context for your audience, that I didn't just wake up one day with no game background at all and just kind of just pull this out of thin air. I've been in the industry off and on for a number of years. So just kind of adding that as context. And yeah, that's pretty much, oh, well, what I was going to say was, as a small company, as someone who's trying to get a game out in, battling, 800-pound behemoths in the space, right? It's hard to get noticed. But one thing I want to try to do more than anything is to have my ear very open to the community. So as we build a community for Zoo titles, whether it's Hime, whether it's Classic, I want to invite the community to form however the community wants to. I'm not personally going to run around and manage 20 different social media, accounts. But if somebody wants to start an official one and say, hey, Josh, what do you think about this? Come talk to us. Then I'll be in there and I'll, do everything I can to kind of support that thing. And if you have any feedback, when the game comes out, or even before, if you're kind of looking at, Board Game Geek or whatever, if you see something, feel free to ping Zoo Tiles on Facebook. There's also Zoo_Tiles on Instagram. Those are pretty much the main two. But if you want to talk, game design or tile design, or if you even want to sneak peek as to what's coming up in Starter Set 2, we can talk about that. So anyway, I just wanted to make sure that I got it out to everyone that I want to be very open to the community. And I know, being a TCG player myself from back in the day, sometimes companies do things sometimes they say one thing and do another. Sometimes they do things out of the blue, and you're like, what was that all about? So um, just kind of, I want people to know that that's not going to happen, at least as long as I can handle it, or as long as am in charge of that kind of stuff. So please feel free to, give me your feedback, and find us on those channels, and we can chat. My door's open is basically what I'm trying to say.
That's super awesome. Yeah. And like I'll reiterate one more time, link in the description for the pre-ordering of the game, and also to, like you said, the Facebook and everything like that, so you guys can follow when things like the set 2 is getting closer to coming out, or things like that I think are kind of cool, like that unique size sleeves for it. I'll be curious on those as well. But thanks a lot for coming in for all 3 of these videos. It was super awesome. I'll be sure to keep in touch as well for any of the future endeavors for this. And yeah, so thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. This was great.
Awesome.
All right.
Talk to you later.